Hey guys, it's Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, back again with Doctor Who Classic. Last time on Doctor Who, we had the Romans. What all happened on that one?
A lot of really kind of silly physical comedy. A bunch of stuff that really was unnecessary, but it was okay. But the main thing that came out of it is that the Doctor inadvertently gave Emperor Nero the idea to burn down the city of Rome.
Yeah, which he was maybe a little too happy about that he caused that. But yeah, we did have the Doctor's interactions with Caesar Nero, and those were all just fun, watching him sort of, well, especially when he was having to tap dance around the part where he can't play the harp, you know? So the lyre, yeah, that was all interesting. And we also had the Doctor and Vicky were on an adventure in Rome. Ian and Barbara were on an adventure in Rome, and they never met up, and so they didn't know what the other had gone through, which was funny.
Yeah. Barbara was sold into slavery, and Ian was sent to be a gladiator.
Yeah. And then they did all end up back at the house. They went off into the TARDIS, and apparently as the TARDIS took off, it was being dragged down to some sort of planet.
Stuck in something.
Yeah, which leads us into this episode.
Now, I will say this, and I've said this before, and other people have questioned me about it. Again, I watched the first 3 seasons of Doctor Who, from when it started in '63 until we left England to come back to the United States in June of '66. For some reason, the Web Planet is the one that sticks in my memory. Now, I've been trying to figure out why that is. You understand, I'm born in 1951, so I grew up with all those 50s monster movies or semi-monster movies, Godzilla, Mothra, Them, which was about giant ants. So for some reason I was fascinated by this idea of, anthropomorphic bugs. And when I saw this, and again, I realized that a lot of the commenters have said it really doesn't hold up to modern special effects. But for 1963, to watch the Menoptera and all the rest of these bug-like creatures interacting with the Doctor and Ian and Barbara and Vicky was just fascinating. I would have guessed I'd been about 13 years old back then, so maybe that's why it sticks with me. I don't know specifically why, but this was always one of my favorites.
This one, you said the Crusade as well.
Yes.
Which I think should be coming up pretty soon.
In fact, I think it's next. Yeah,
it might be. We'll have to look at the schedule.
And the main reason for that was, again, at my junior high school at Lakenheath, RAF Lakenheath, there, the Strategic Air Command base. My history classes, we were beginning to learn about world history, and I was learning about the Greeks and the Romans and the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians, that ancient world history. So, again, fascinated with the idea of the Romans before this, and then coming up here with this next one with the Crusades. Pretty cool. And again, the fact that only recently did I realize that I actually met one of the actors who's in the Crusades, met him in either 1980 or 81. Funny man, and I'll talk more about him whenever we see him in those episodes.
Yeah. Well, this one, the Web Planet, it is 6 parts, so like normal, we're going to be breaking this up into 2 videos. So yeah, I'll be interested to see what this one's about. So yeah, I guess that is pretty much that. You got anything else?
Nope.
All right.
Don't spray the DDT.
Then we might as well go ahead and get right into this episode of Doctor Who. Here we go.
Right, I hate to say this, but it's literally a World Wide Web.
Yeah. All right. We'll give you that one.
No vegetation. And I haven't seen anything move yet. We're on the moon.
A few more chairs in the console room.
Good.
It's an interesting costume, to say the least.
Oh, she's probably heard an extrasonic sound. You know, the thing that young people and young animals hear. Excuse me, you're in the way.
Oh, stop.
You calling them old, Doc?
Stop. Are you all right, man?
Well, there are things that my students can hear that I can't.
Well,
Doctor.
Hmm?
Doctor, we must get
yeah,
out
but
of
Ian
here.
and Barbara aren't your age.
The power built up.
How are they not seeing this on the monitor?
Well,
How do we open the doors? We have no power.
he's gonna pry it open.
Another. Yes,
See, it's
well,
times like this where you need them to just be doors.
I didn't want to.
Vicky, you take these, you'll feel much better.
What is it?
Oh, it's just
Well, now
something to make
Vicky
you
and Barbara are trapped on there for a while.
Let's see the container.
Have you decided yet whether to take the prescribed dose?
It looks a bit medieval.
What do you mean?
Well, you wouldn't like it if I wanted to stick leeches all over you, would you? And I mean, it boils down to the same thing. They might have taken these in your time, but that
Now,
doesn't mean...
wait a minute. You can't blame my generation for everything, and those pills belong to the doctor.
You must have
I was
picked
gonna
them up on
say,
this
this should
travel
be
thing, 'cause I'd never
even
seen
farther past Vicky.
aspirin before. I wish I'd gone to your school. We had to take a certificate of education in medicine, physics, chemistry.
Wait a minute. How old were you?
Well, I was 10 when I took those.
10? Well, why don't you just pander to my old-fashioned medieval superstitions and take them for me?
Well,
After all, it would save me having to put
Aspirin
makeup on
actually
and
goes all the
mask
way
and
back,
dance around a fire
at least to the
anointed
Middle
with
Ages, if
medieval
not before.
spirits.
It's from willow bark. It's salicylic acid. The Native Americans had used it for centuries before the Europeans arrived.
was it a present?
Mm.
From Ian?
No. From Nero, as a matter of fact.
From Nero? But it couldn't have
I
been
haven't
we
had a chance to tell you before, but Ian and I went to Rome also.
What?
I'll tell you all about it when you wake up.
Very subtle foreshadowing there. Cleaning the doctor's butterfly collection.
Doctor, look. That was built.
Yes, but when? It's old. So old. With the state it's in.
Curious, though.
Yes, it's curious. Yes. But we must find something more tangible. Hmm? Come along.
Gotta say, these backgrounds
Oh,
look
Doctor.
really good.
No.
My pants, sir.
Yes, but that's your affair, not mine.
Here you are.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Now,
last time you encountered water on an alien world, it was acid.
You've ruined it. That was my Coal Hill school tie. You just
saved your life. You were about to have a wash in there, weren't you? Or probably drink some of it. Ah, you really nearly had the remnants of a Coal Hill school teacher in there, so in this wretched old, ragged old tie.
Never mind about that. What is it?
Passion. My TARDIS.
There's an action-packed last 5 minutes there.
Yeah. Other than that, though, I understand it's setting it all up, but again, rather slow paced. But
Yeah.
again, it's setting up 5 or 6 different things there.
Yeah. Now, did they say the pyramid was made of gold?
I think that's what they said.
Okay. Because then I'm thinking that the reason, like, Barbara's kind of being controlled, especially by her left arm, is because maybe they're trying to get the gold bracelet that Nero gave her.
That's entirely possible.
Yeah. Which is why she specifically said that she got that from Nero.
Yeah.
So it's the only thing I can think of, because I don't know, there could be some other explanation, but it did seem kind of odd that they specifically referenced, oh, well, I got this random bracelet I have from Nero. Oh, you didn't tell us that you went to Rome and stuff, so that could be a possible reason.
Yeah.
I gotta say, well, first off, I'm sure this is why when they rebooted the series with new Doctor Who, they just put in the doors Like, it's not like, well, on the outside are, the normal police box doors, but on the inside, they're the round things and everything. It's like, no, it's the exact same door both ways. Yeah. Probably for the best, considering everything that happens here. It's just a door you have to open. But also, I don't know if I would... Like, if I was in Vicky's situation, I don't know if I would just start randomly pressing buttons on the TARDIS console.
But we tend to forget, though, that she is not from the 20th century. She's from, like, the 24th or 25th century. So, and like she said, she has degrees in, physics and chemistry and medicine. So, if anybody could understand how to run the TARDIS randomly, it might be her. But yes, she should not have done any of that.
Yeah. Well, especially because the TARDIS can't go anywhere specific. Because, like, even if she can try to operate it, she has no control over where it goes, so...
By the way, this is just the random thought on the pyramid there, and they talk about how it being so old. One of the things I used to tell my world history students, and you may remember this, is if you take the time from the Roman Empire to today, which is 2,000 years, do you realize that if you were to take that same time period before the Roman Empire, 2,000 years before the Romans became an empire, this is way before they became a republic, but 2,000 years before they became an empire, the pyramids would still have been 500 years older than that.
Yeah.
Right? The pyramids are literally as far as I remember, like the oldest known structures that are still standing on Earth.
Yeah.
They are literally 25 to 2800 BC. And it's incredible that we don't have literally anything else that we can measure time by like we can with the pyramids.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, didn't Cleopatra, start, a restoration project to try to fix up the pyramids?
Yeah.
So, it's like, that, like you said, that's 2,000 years ago when they were already trying to, what, these things are old. We should clean these up.
Yeah.
Now, another 2,000 years have passed to today, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, they were there long before the Greeks became the Greeks that we understand, long before the Romans. Roughly, I say this would have been the very old kingdom, Khufu or Cheops, whichever. I always prefer the term Khufu. But even Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid, he was not the first person to build a pyramid. They were generations before him when they were, starting the pyramids at Saqqara with the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid and some of those other ones. So, I was always fascinated by the pyramids.
Yeah. Well, of course, since we're specifically also talking about this on Doctor Who, we have to say aliens did it, right?
Well, there is that theory, yes.
I actually wouldn't be surprised if someday Doctor Who did it where it's like, well, the Doctor figured out how to build the pyramids, and that's why we did it. So, technically, yeah, it was aliens, but it was the Doctor.
To me, one of the most fascinating things about that is literally on the entire continent of Africa, that is the only place where the pyramids could have been built. Right? There's a bedrock underneath them that would support that weight, because, after all, there's 2 million stones that weigh 5 or 6 tons apiece. Don't quote me on those numbers, but any place else, and that would have literally sunk into the sand of the Sahara Desert, or it would have crushed the crust of the earth with that. So that spot is the only place where they could have been built. Now, how did the Egyptians figure that out, or was it just random luck? And the other thing is, the 4 corners of the Great Pyramid directly align perfectly with north, south, east, and west.
Yeah, that's also pretty crazy too. So,
and that if you were to, and again, remember, they don't have the wheel or any kind of modern instruments or anything like that. If you measure the 90-degree angles on the Great Pyramid, and because it's 2 or 3 football fields wide on each corner, it is not out of that 90-degree angle more than 2 inches at any given spot. So it's just fascinating what the ancient peoples, not just the Egyptians, but the Sumerians and the Indus River Valley and the Chinese and some of those other people were able to do without the kinds of modern day equipment and science that we think of now.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting too, just with any of these civilizations, you kind of wonder, it's whose crazy idea was this to make these things? But then you can also take that a step further. It's whose idea was it in Egypt to make it's just a pyramid? Because I feel with all the other civilizations, they do a bit more, they make it a bit more fancy or something, or they kind of branch off from that sort of design. But it's no, it's just a giant, multiple triangles, and it's like, and we just built this. What are we going to do with it? Look at it.
Yeah, well, of course, it was the monument to the men who were supposedly buried in it.
Yeah.
But I remember when I first started teaching world history, because I'd known about the pyramids, but didn't know about their construction and things like that. So I did some research on it, and it turns out the original burial place of the kings was called a mastaba, if I recall correctly. And it was just it would be like the very bottom level of a pyramid. It was kind of long and low, but of course it had the slanted sides, the 45-degree angle sides or whatever it was, because they didn't have the modern day kind of construction that we have where you can put posts at each corner and that sort of stuff. And I can't remember, I don't think it was Snefru, but whoever the first pharaoh who wanted this, of course they started planning these things as soon as they became pharaoh, and he said to Imhotep, who was his builder, he said, what can we do to make my mastaba look better than all the rest of these? And so the guy started thinking about it, and he said, well, sir, we could add a second story, but we would have to do essentially a smaller version of the first story and then kind of shrink it down to put it on top of the first story so that the weight would not crush the first story. And so they did that, and the pharaoh looked at it and went, how many times can we do this? And the guy said, I don't know. I mean, obviously we just keep going until we reach some kind of apex. And so they did that. And the first pyramid was only like 4 or 5 stories tall. And once that had been accomplished, once they realized they could do that, that's when they started getting grander and grander until we reached the Great Pyramid, which was the tallest building in the world from about 2800 BC up until the building of the Eiffel Tower. And that was, 1889.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was, I think, about 500 feet tall, roughly a 50-story building tall. And again, no mortar holding it together, nothing. It's just rocks piled on top of each other.
Yeah.
And that's just fascinating that they were able to do that.
And there were like a couple after the big one.
Yes.
And they obviously weren't as big. So that kind of makes me wonder, it's like, how would you be, the pharaoh, it's like, okay, well, obviously I want to build a pyramid for myself for when I'm dead. And it's like, okay, but do I try to go bigger than that one? Or do I just settle for something smaller? And it's like,
well, the Great Pyramid is in a complex of 6, if I recall correctly. Khufu built his, and I can't remember if he had his wife's built at the same time. Hers is obviously smaller. When Khufu died, his oldest son, Khafre, became the pharaoh. And I'm guessing, not thinking he would ever be greater than his father, he decided to build his next to his father's. So his is smaller, and of course Khafre built one for his wife. But Khafre died, if I recall correctly, without any children, so his brother Menkaure then became the new pharaoh, and he built his smaller than his father's and his brother's, and of course his wife's was smaller than that. So there again, at the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, there's a complex of 6 of them there, but they're all over northern Egypt and down into what was then called Nubia or Kush, which would today be the Sudan and places like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's hundreds of them all over the place there.
Yeah. Well,
where did we get off on that?
Well, there's a pyramid in this episode.
A pyramid, oh yes.
That's how that happened.
Never put something in there for a couple of history majors.
Yeah, I mean, but in all fairness, we do know that that's what people like to see on these videos, so you're not going to get that from any other reaction channel, I'll tell you that one. So we opt to get on to part 2, though.
Part 2, the ZARBI. Is he in sleeping? Did he pass out?
I guess he got knocked out by whatever that was.
Oh, he was inside the trap.
Oh, yeah. Don't know how he got out, though.
I have a shock for you. The ship's gone. Vanished.
Makes you wonder if they built this one gigantic set and are just filming various pieces of it.
Maybe.
Dragged away.
Oh, there it is.
Pretty good miniatures, though.
The bracelet. I would. Who are you? What do you want? Stay where you are.
Maybe they're going against the ants that want gold.
Ah, the tracks have disappeared. Kill her.
No.
A stranger must not be trusted.
These ZARBI that you seem frightened of. Maybe we could help you.
Have you any weapons?
No, but we want.
It's a roller coaster of a conversation.
Without
Oh. Great job, guys. I was kind of hoping that she was going for a weapon, you know, get that warrior instinct going.
Yes, the silverfish. At least that's what I called them.
I feel bad for anyone in those costumes that has to hunch over all day. Well, that's lucky. You know, maybe if you guys had more than just a stick.
Get away!
The ZARBI can control everyone, even us, the Monoctra, when they use that metal.
go.
Don't.
I see. So it was the bracelet.
Good call.
Well,
What will they do to us?
Why do you come now?
you know, sometimes I think, do you think Hartnell knew what he was getting into when he signed up to the show? Because, like, when there's moth people and giant ants and you have to, like, do sign language to them and then a tube drops down over your head.
Well, I'm sure that when it was pitched to him, it was more the historical aspects. you know.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, with the success of the Daleks, I guess that's the rest of this came along.
Yeah.
And again, if I may make a completely off-the-wall comment here, the cave, the nest there of the ZARBI, and I may have told you part of this story, I've told you before. In 1976, I did a production of Shakespeare's Macbeth. I know we're not supposed to say it, the Scottish play. And the idea was that our set was very similar to what you saw there. It looked like a web, and in fact, it had been macrame. They took months, and they did basically about 15 plus miles of macrame. They had this gigantic web which was suspended over the stage because, as you probably are aware, Macbeth is a story of, you know, lies and deceit and, oh, what a tangled web we weave, as Shakespeare said in another play. But anyway, the idea was that it could be raised and lowered, you know, raised on one side, you have a scene there, and then it's lowered down and raised another place, and there were tunnels and all this sort of stuff in it. But it was, although it was visually outstanding, it was just horrible to work with because it never raised fast enough, you know. And we had guys with actual torches, you know, with flames coming in through it, and it was just like, this whole thing is going to go up and kill us all. We were absolutely certain. But it has stayed in the memory of all the people who worked on it over the past 40-something years now as Macbeth. But again, it looked very similar to that, just a lot of intricate weaving and everything, and it's, again, it looked like a gigantic web that we were doing the play in.
Oh, yeah.
So very similar to that.
Is that a rule that it has to be called the Scottish play?
Well, you're never supposed to bring up the name of Macbeth, but I don't know if that's actually in a theater building or The idea is that the play is cursed, like that there's never been a successful production of it. Even the ones with great actors in it, there's something always that's wrong with it. And I don't know, but that's one of the great theater superstitions, is you should never actually mention the name of the play, just call it the Scottish play.
Okay, then. That's an interesting one. I would not have expected that.
Yeah. Our problem was being in the mid-'70s, the actor who was cast as Macbeth decided to play him like Richard Nixon. Not, with the Nixon intonations and things like that, but, as this deeply flawed, self-doubting kind of individual, and it was interminable. That's a role that I've always wanted to play. When I was younger, I wanted to play Macbeth, but I see Macbeth as completely the opposite. I see him as completely driven, that when he questions what he's doing, it's not because, I'm doing all this horrible stuff, should I be doing all this? It's like, here's what I've done. Should I have done it? Here are the reasons why I should. Here are the reasons why I shouldn't. I've already done it. Let's move on. At one point he says, I've stepped in blood so far that to turn back now would be more difficult than to go over. So I just plow right through it, go right to the end. Damned be him who cries, hold it up. So anyway, I played Duncan, by the way. I got to die in the end of the first act, beginning of the second act. So I was off stage for about 2 hours before I had to come back as a ghost.
All right.
I know. Somebody suggested in one of the notes, what haven't I done? I don't know. There's so much that I have.
Well,
I have not finished my explanation.
Now, you want to talk about being hunched over the entire time in the ant costume? Imagine the poor guy that's in the little silverfish down there.
oh, yeah.
He has to be crawling on all fours.
What controls did you touch?
Well, I got thrown against the control panel and I just pressed any switches I could see. It suddenly became alive. I couldn't help it.
You have performed a miracle, my dear. You have realigned the fluid link. The power is back.
If only Barbara were here, we could go.
Just make a break for it.
Trying to destroy my ship.
I got some wire work now.
What do you think the doctor is saying?
I don't know. I hope he's asking where Barbara is.
Oh, right, Barbara. Yeah, so Barbara, he just remembered that.
Oh, by the way, I want you to take a couple of these. It'll be very good for your breathing in this rarefied atmosphere.
Oh. What about Barbara and Vicky?
Well, you leave Vicky to me, but when you do finally catch up with Barbara, see that she takes some. She's probably had the same experience with breathing as we have. Hold on. No. Don't unplug it. You must never do that. You must never break the time and relative dimension link. Come on.
Hope it's a long cord then. Also, if he had those pills that can help with the atmosphere, why not just use that over the jackets that only work for an hour?
Oh, it's useless. It's useless. There. Wait. Come along. Put me through, will you? Come along. Drop this hair dryer or whatever it is.
I was going to say, it's still a cave.
Yeah. But it looks a lot better.
Yeah.
What do you...
Here's something to put on your resume. I wrestled with a man-sized ant.
Well,
Wow.
yeah, they can actually,
Very fast-moving.
yeah, they can actually get him around.
Those things invaded your planet.
You do not know our story. We lived at peace with them until they were made militant by the dark power.
And by the time we sensed the danger, the ZARBI were too strong.
So you left the planet?
We had no choice.
Preston, we've both lost friends. Come with me to the crater. You know the country. We can collect your friend and mine.
There are many of my friends in the crater of needles.
All the more reason to go.
Alright then. And that's part 3. Alright. I didn't take down a ton of notes in this episode.
Well,
or in any of these. So.
Again, it's a very simple story. I mean, it's not a lot of depth to the story. Although, I was just thinking right there at the end when Vreston was sharing her story, this, again, only vaguely kind of continues that anti-Nazi theme after all the Nazis had taken France and most of the rest of Europe, and the Allies there in Great Britain were massing to land on D-Day. So again, if this was 1964, that would have been 20 years after the D-Day invasion in 44. Oh, yeah. So again, I don't know if that's what the author was going for, but it's certainly, here's a group of relatively peaceful people who have been taken out of their homeland by this basically non-intelligent group, and now they are simply saying, they have all the weapons, they have everything going for them, but we must try to take our homeland back. Yeah. So that again may be way too deep for what they were trying for, but I'm kind of getting that vibe. It's not quite the resistance, but here's a group of people who said to themselves, we've been pushed out of our homeland and we are normally a peaceful people, but enough is enough. We must try to fight back.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, we can hop into the notes again. I didn't take down too many notes, so we can. Luckily, we had that 20-hour conversation about the pyramids, and then you brought up Macbeth, so we'll count those as part of the discussion anyway. So let's see. The first thing I wrote down is the atmosphere, which that was interesting with because at first when they showed it, it's like, okay, well, is there an atmosphere here? That would be interesting. Maybe there isn't one, but it's just a very thin atmosphere. Yeah. So they had to wear the suits. And then that was dropped, and then the doctor just had pills. Again, it does make you question, Doctor, why didn't you just use the pills?
Well, my take on that, and again, this came right after you asked that question the last time. If you're just going out for a couple of hours, maybe the pills have a longer lasting effect. But, hey, we've got this equipment, let's just use it if we're only going to be out for an hour. And then once they realize they're stuck here for a while, then the doctor says, well, the canisters won't work, the air purifiers won't work, take these oxygenation pills. And so I kind of understand that. Yeah. And also, the writer might have written himself into a corner there by going, oh, if the canisters aren't going to work, we'll need to have something so that they don't have to wear those bulky Macintoshes the entire time.
Yeah. Because, I mean, they don't want to wear those heavy costumes. I mean, they're not like the ZARBI and the...
Menoptera.
Okay. Menoptera. Okay.
And if I recall correctly, now don't quote me, we could look this up. I believe Menoptera has something to do with the species of moth, which is why they ultimately got that name. And again, the average kid back then wouldn't have known that. I don't think I would have known that. But years later, when I got to thinking about it and looked that up, I went, oh, yeah, I think it's a species of moth. So they're not actually butterflies. They're supposedly more of the moth family.
Yeah. So let's see. We did have the talk about aspirin between Barbara and Vicky, which that was an interesting conversation. And, with Vicky being like, oh, you want me to take these sort of medieval remedies? Which, again, it is kind of funny. It's like, oh, it's this medieval remedy that you're giving me. But it's like, well, yes and no, because this is also the stuff that was on the TARDIS in the Doctor's first aid kit, which is probably even more advanced than anything that Vicky had seen, but it is still just aspirin. So,
well, I mean, aspirin's been around again in its aspirin form. I think the Bayer company was the first ones to patent it. When they, and again, I can't remember if they did it originally from organic compounds or if they were the first ones to synthesize salicylic acid. But again, I know the Native Americans had been using willow bark tea for centuries, but I suspect it went all the way back to, if not the Middle Ages, all the way back again to Greece and Rome and Egypt.
Yeah.
Any place that had willows.
Yeah. But that was just interesting because it's like, okay, I get they wanted to do that to show like, oh, well, you know, Vicky, who's from further into the future, she would kind of look down on maybe the medical techniques of 1964. But at the same time, again, you do have to stop and be like, yeah, but if the Doctor has this... Granted, they never say when the Doctor is from. We just know he's vaguely from another time.
Of course, the Doctor could have popped into an apothecary shop in 1963 and picked up a couple of bottles of aspirin.
That's
because,
true.
I mean, after all, it is a natural analgesic. You take it and it will relieve muscle pain and headache pain and things like that. So
yeah. Well, and it was also just interesting getting like, you know, the I guess schooling system that Vicky went through, you know, where it's like, well, you know, by age 10 she had pretty much studied everything, you know. So
had to spend an entire hour every week.
1 hour every week. That, I'm sure, you know, every parent teaching from home wishes it was that short. So, let's see.
But again, I mean, talk about if she's like 400 years in the future. If you go back 400 years from us, there was a time, even in the late Middle Ages, when if you had a migraine headache, which is a persistent headache, not just like the ones that come and go, there were physicians who actually thought that was being caused by a demon inside your skull.
Yeah.
And they would actually take a drill and bore a hole into your skull to let the demon out. So.
Which, it's not like it needed a hole to get into your skull then. It's like, well, can't it come out the ear or something? But
well, I mean, talk about kicking completely off the track. But, when people sneeze, and worldwide it's accepted, we say Gesundheit, that literally means God bless you. Because the idea was that when you sneezed, literally for a second, your soul was exposed. And they were worried that if you didn't say God bless you to the person who sneezed, then a demon could enter them as they breathed back in, I think, from the sneeze. So everybody said God bless you, or Gesundheit, originally from the Germans, to prevent the demon from entering your body through your airways.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, because it's got to have been a long time since that was the general, assumption that, well, your soul is exposed. It's been a long time since people actually thought that, but still, it's just a natural human response to just say bless you. It doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter, anything, it's just natural. You just say bless you, and that's it. So...
yeah, I mean, but modern day medicine is really only within the last maybe 150 years. I mean, modern day surgery goes back to the early 1900s. The idea of doctors working in an antiseptic and sterile operating room is very new.
Yeah.
Late 1800s, early 1900s. The use of anesthetics to put patients to sleep while they're being operated on, and Novocaine and stuff like that. It's just, you'd be surprised how much we have learned just in the last 100 years.
Yeah. So then imagine how much they've learned in the next 400 years after that.
Yeah.
So, let's see. We did have the bracelet, which, yeah, I did catch that, when she says, like, oh, well, you have this new bracelet. It's like, oh, well, Emperor Nero gave it to me. And then it's like, oh, well, you didn't say. And then that was just sort of the end of it. And it was like, oh, okay, well, that's just a fun little scene, and kind of continues from the last episode. But then when she started to be, taken, and especially with her left arm forward, it's like, okay, well, maybe it's the gold, because they did say that the pyramid, I think, was made of gold. Unless they said it was just old, and I misheard it through the 60s audio, which is entirely possible. There's some times where, because the audio is not the most clear on these episodes, but... But I heard gold, that it was made of gold, so it's like, okay, well, maybe they control through gold, and that's the only reason they brought up... Because you also wonder, it's like, okay, well, if Nero gave her that bracelet, if I was Barbara, I would, chuck that out of the TARDIS at the first chance I got. Like, why would you keep anything from Nero?
But again, you have to understand, as a history teacher, she would have said, I know who Nero was, but I got an actual Roman bracelet. That's just one of those things. It's like right here in Oklahoma City, we have the 45th Infantry Division Museum. All right, the 45th were very active in World War II in Europe. Part of I can't remember if the 45th was there at D-Day, but they were one of the very first groups to get into Berlin, right there in May of 45. And they were literally the first Americans, the first allies to get down into Hitler's bunker. And they grabbed a lot of his personal effects. I mean, like, straight razor and flag on his wall and some of the other stuff, his diary or some kind of journal or something. And all of that is right here in the museum in Oklahoma City. And people go, why would we want to look at stuff that belonged to Adolf Hitler? Well, because it's history,
Yeah.
If for nothing else, you look at that and go, we must make sure that this kind of crap never happens again.
Well, yeah. Well, and it's also, I guess it's also just, it's like, well, why would we want to see things that belong to Hitler? It's like, because we took it from him when he died. So
yeah,
it's like after we beat him, we took it all. So that's why, So yeah, I guess it could be that. And also, I would imagine, the Doctor would also want an artifact like that too. So it does make sense, but it's like, the way they sort of present it is like, oh, well, I got this from Nero. They do that whole conversation. It's like, okay, that has to be the only reason that they brought that up, is just because they needed a way for Barbara to be controlled in that episode.
Yeah.
So,
but it was interesting. I mean, it's like when she was dusting off his butterfly collection. We look at it now because we know of the Menoptera, and we think, oh, that was foreshadowing. So, oh, look at this gold bracelet that Nero gave me. That's a foreshadowing of exactly what you talked about. So,
right.
I mean, it's good writing, but at the first time you look at it, it's like, seriously, why would she keep that?
Yeah, like, especially, like, and again, that's the thing, is that, yes, I get it, she's a history teacher, she would love to have, an actual Roman bracelet, but it's like, but specifically from Nero, it's like, I don't know about that, so, let's see, well, I guess we could move on to just costumes, because that's sort of my next two notes are the ZARBI and the Menoptera. Interesting costumes, a lot of them too. At least 3 of the Menoptera, and I guess at least 3 of the ZARBI, and then whatever the little silverfish guy is.
Yeah.
So that's 6 pretty big costumes too.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking, like, it's sort of a weird thing, because while the costumes, especially for the ZARBI, they look good, but in the same way that Godzilla looks good, where it's like, yeah, he looks really cool and stuff, but you can always sort of look at it and be like, that is a rubber suit that a man is walking around in.
Now, the one thing about the ZARBI that I don't quite understand is obviously they got the human legs, the big, thick human legs.
Yeah.
But their other 4 legs are just little bitty sticks, and they don't seem to be able to do anything with them. I was kind of surprised that they weren't able to use their hands other than to wave them around. But then, when Vicky had the little harness put on her, and the ZARBI went over and closed its mandibles on her to take it off, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
But they should have done that earlier. They should have been a little bit more, again, I don't want to say setting it up, but definitely should have shown us what the ZARBI are capable of back in the first episode.
Yeah.
Other than, just waving their tentacles and their 4 legs. Not 4 legs, but 4 legs.
Yeah. It almost makes me wonder, too, like, I wonder if, like, the back is, like, maybe a bit more weighted to help with the balance. Because, again, I feel like that would be... I feel like that would be brutal, even more than, like, you have to sit in a Dalek all day or something. At least probably in a Dalek, you get to sit down in that Dalek. Like, these guys cannot sit down in these costumes, and they are constantly... Michael Jackson leaning forward, So it's like, I wonder if like the back is sort of weighted to try to keep them up a bit.
That's entirely possible. Yeah, that's a good thought.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, you look at them, it's like, these look good, especially with, the costumes that we've had so far on the show. It's like, they look good, but they do always look like there is a guy in a suit there. So it's one of those give and takes, Now,
I did notice, and I think this is something they did, understanding visually, that these were going to look, good and bad. But if you notice that in several of the shots, there seems to be some kind of like Vaseline or something spread on the camera lens to soften it out. So I think they understood that maybe when they started rehearsing that these don't look good, and so they had to do something. They were trying to soften it up so that they would look a little bit more realistic.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, that sort of effect they had, it mainly seemed like they did that when they were outside. Yeah. Like when they were in the cave with the TARDIS and everything and the hairdryer, it's like they didn't use that, but like outside they sort of did that, but it also kind of made it look like, I don't know, like the sets sort of were able to shine a bit more too.
Now, you do understand that reference about the hairdryer, because in the 60s we didn't have handhelds. Back then, and I remember my mom had one that she had at home. Of course, in the beauty salons and things like that, it was just this big, huge thing on support that came down over your head, and you had to sit there for like 20 minutes to do that because it just circulated warm air or hot air in there. But at home, they had this kind of plastic, almost like a shower cap that you put on, and it had a hose, and then you plugged it into this dryer roughly the size of a vacuum cleaner, and it circulated the hot air. Now, I will say this, and I'm not too vain to admit this. When I was young, when I washed my hair, it took hours for my hair to dry. It's not like you, whose hair dries just like that. I mean, you walk out from taking a shower, and I realize you use the handheld, but still, your hair dries very, very quickly. Mine does not. Mine just stays wet. So when I remember as far back as junior high school that I asked my mom one time, I said, does that, plastic cap detach from the rest of your hairdryer? And she went, I think so. So she took it off and said, why do you want to know that? And I said, well, let me try something. So after a shower one day, I took the cap off and just used the hose to dry my hair with, and pretty much from that time on, every time that I was still living at home, and I lived at home until I was a senior in high school, I'd use that to dry my hair because it could be done in 5 minutes rather than go to school and second or third hour your hair finally dries out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was gonna say too, because I mean there have been days like after I take a shower, sometimes the hair dryer doesn't work, and so what I'll do is, obviously don't have my glasses on, I will just go and just completely shake out my hair, and within like 2 or 3 minutes, it's pretty dry actually.
Yeah.
So
I've seen you do that, and I'm thinking, I wish my hair did that. But seriously, if I don't use a hairdryer, my hair doesn't dry for hours. I mean, especially here in the very back, it takes forever. I mean, literally at lunch, I'm going, why is my hair still wet? Why do I still feel damp on my neck?
Yeah.
So, in a discussion of Doctor Who, we've discussed
the pyramids, Macbeth,
and hairdryers.
Yeah, it's kind of been an off-topic video today, but I mean, that is sort of the thing. It's like with this episode, it's like there's not a ton of things to really talk about in these 3 episodes.
Yeah. It's very simple, very straightforward, not a lot of depth to it.
Right.
But it's a lot of fun because it does bring up all this other crap.
Right. It's specifically the episode that's bringing all this up, So it's because the Doctor specifically said hairdryer. So, which that kind of reminded me, just this voice that's talking to him. It kind of reminded me of the Great Intelligence, which wasn't that also the Web of Fear. So that seems to be like a pattern. Is anytime there's like webs, there's
now again, this may just be me. Is the I guess it is, because I think the Doctor finally referred to her as the Queen, the Ant Queen, or the Queen of the Ants, whatever. It was a female voice.
Yeah.
And again, Doctor Who, way before most other TV shows or movies of this time, actually had women in positions of power. We saw that when we went out through our 12 doctors that we went through before we got up to the 50th anniversary, you always see women in positions of power, and the fact that, again, that Barbara and Vicky are very powerful, very strong characters here. That's not something you normally would have seen, especially in American television back in the 60s. Now, the British series, The Avengers, had Patrick McNee and what's her name? Anyway, the three, Honor Blackman and the others that followed her. So the British seem to be a lot better at putting women in very strong roles, whether they're good guys or bad guys, way more so than the Americans did.
Yeah.
So kudos.
Yeah.
What do we got?
Well, I guess sort of continuing on with the costume talk with the Menoptera. It was interesting because it's like, okay, well, at first I didn't know, like, is that a mask they're wearing, or did they actually, like, put makeup on the face? And then they actually started to talk, so that was pretty cool to see. And even though, yeah, it is sort of this big, cumbersome costume, and especially with the wings, they actually did some wire work in this episode. This is the first time we've had that where, yeah, on a couple shots, one of them just took off, just off screen. It's like, oh, okay, we have the budget for that now. Okay. It's like, so that was impressive.
Yeah.
It's actually very interesting to watch how the budget grows, because especially, when we did the tour of Classic Who, and it's like, we started with, like, the Daleks, the original Dalek serial and stuff, and then we would jump ahead, we would get stuff with the Third Doctor and all that, and every time it's like, it was such a leap forward. So now to go back and see the progression and, be like, oh, well, this week they got the budget and the approval from the BBC to use wires. Like, okay, cool. And especially, after watching An Adventure in Time and Space, or Space and Time, I don't remember which, where it's like, they started out and it's like, okay, well, we got to be careful when we film here. We don't have too long. We have 4 edits that we can do. And we have to be really, really careful, because if it gets too hot, then the sprinklers will go off and everything will just go nuts. To now being like, well, we have the sets, because these look like pretty decently sized sets, and probably like the best space set they've had so far. It's like we've got these pretty good sets, you can kind of see distance, like we've made it look like, yeah, it does look like there are planets in the distance and everything. And we have the approval and the budget to let one of our actors fly up. Like, okay, good job, guys.
The thing about the Menoptera face thing, I think it's a combination of some kind of mask or headpiece, but leaving the mouth to be able to talk, and then it's all kind of blended together. Again, I did something very similar to that in 1981 when we did Beauty and the Beast. Had this huge cap on my head that had these kind of gigantic ram's horns on them and a big wig and everything on that, and it came down right to the top of my eyebrows, and then there was this very large false nose, but they very deliberately left my eyes and my mouth so that you could actually see my expressions, so it wasn't just all plastered in one spot and all you got to see were my lips moving. So that was a lot of fun.
Well, add that to the list of things that you've done. You were the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, so...
Yes, and this was, by the way, 10 years before Disney did it.
Yeah. I feel like once we get through Classic Doctor Who, we're just going to have a complete, like, encyclopedia of your theatrical career.
Well, I've actually been doing theater for 53 years.
Well, yeah,
I started as a sophomore in high school, so yeah, I've done a lot.
Yeah.
I was going to say I just last October did, I think, my 153rd or 154th production, either as an actor or a director. So.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like, you have so many stories, and we have so many episodes where you can tell those stories.
Yes. Well, anyway, all right. Let's move on.
I mean, the last thing I really wrote down was the star charts, which I was kind of thinking, like, okay, so he does have just a machine for star charts, and it kind of seems like. Maybe it also works with like a time chart, maybe too, because he said he didn't want to disconnect it from the TARDIS, otherwise the whole thing would go out of whack. And it's like, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. I was kind of thinking like, okay, well, why hasn't he used this before? It's like, I'm sure he would have used it before if he had any control over where he was going.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the thing. It's like, I wonder, you know, and I don't even know like when the Doctor will gain sort of control over where he goes, but it does make me wonder if we get to there, then maybe he would start using that more often. But yeah, I thought that was just kind of interesting. Like, oh, you had charts this whole time, but it's not like he's been able to use them.
Well, I kind of get the idea is it's not to show you where he's going, but to show you once he gets there where he is.
Yeah, that's true.
Because he says we happen to be in this particular galaxy, and I think I've been here before. This is the planet Vortis, but it's got moons, and it didn't used to have moons. What's going on? Yeah. So he doesn't know. It's like a good government employee. Doesn't know where he's going before he leaves. Doesn't know where he is when he gets there. Doesn't know where he's been when he gets back, and all on somebody else's money. So
yeah. And it was also interesting that they pretty much updated the TARDIS set, like. Because normally, like, they would normally show, like, the doors on the left of the screen, and then we just get the round things, and then, there's, like, vaguely a door somewhere else, and you get the scanner, but now the door's on the other side. They have this, like, this entire, like, alcove where, like, the Doctor has a desk where he works, I guess, and then you have 2 doors that lead into, the infirmary or their room or something with those beds that we've had since the Edge of Destruction. So I thought that was interesting. Like, the entire set has kind of changed, but the only thing that's like still consistent is just the console itself. And I guess the doors are pretty much the exact same doors, just in a different place. So I thought that was interesting too. But that is pretty much that's pretty much all I wrote down. So, you got another story before we sign off, or
no? Unless something comes to me in the next 30 seconds.
No, I don't think so. I think, this has been an interesting, a very interesting sort of off-topic episode. But I mean, it's kind of on topic. It's everything that was brought up by the episode. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. Next time we will finish off the Web Planet. But yeah.
Until then.
With all that being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch more of my our Doctor Who classic reactions, you can click on the playlist, you can subscribe if you haven't done that already, and be sure you hit that notification bell. You can support me on Patreon and follow me on social media, links below in the description. See you guys later.